Hello, hello, hello. How we doing, guys? Oh, wow. Hunter, thank you very much for the super chat already, my brother. All right. So, how are we doing? You guys hear me? Give a thumbs up in the chat. Sounds okay. Audio's okay. Looks like it's all good on my end. Um, so today, first of all, welcome back, everyone. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos, and today I want to talk to you guys about the cult mentality and key characteristics. So, obviously, this is something that has been on everybody's mind lately in regards to the happenings in the Western world, certainly. And so, today, what I want to do is talk about what a cult is. We're going to be going over what exactly the definition is. We're going to be going into then subcategories of cults, and then we're going to go into some key characteristics. And the goal of this video, of course I couldn't put it in the title, is to really talk about how BLM is really becoming a cult. And really it fits just basically about every definition that you would use to associate, to identify what a cult is. So we're going to be getting kind of academic in regards to how we classify, how we categorize a cult. And so I'm not saying anything you guys aren't already aware of. Many people are saying that, hey, this looks like we got a cult going on here. But what I hope to do is sort of give some teeth to this argument. So if you guys encounter people, in fact, if you encounter a friend or something, but you'll really be able to argue why it is. And you'll be able to talk about the key characteristics of how this fulfills really all the requirements a scholar would use to look for a cult. And so, again, some of these categories, we're going to be looking at what is a destructive cult? What is a political cult? What is a doomsday cult? What is a sex and polygamous cult? What is a racist cult? What is a terrorist cult? And ironic enough, I think all these boxes are going to be checked. And so really the main thrust of this video is to show it's not just a single cult. It is literally the embodiment of all cults. And I think this is why what we're seeing in culture has been so effective on so many people's minds is it's not just one dimension. It's actually every dimension. And so that's what we're going to be going through. So before I get into it, I want to say thank you to everyone who has gone to my website and supported. I had a couple new signups in the last few days. Thank you very much. If you guys are able and interested, if you appreciate what I try to do on this YouTube channel, going to my website, davidpatrickharry.com, churchoftheeternallogos.com, and clicking that top right button that says donate and setting something up potentially monthly, just maybe a cup of coffee, $5 a month. That would be greatly appreciated by myself. So just wanted to throw that out there before we got going and wanted to say thank you. And I also want to say thanks to Hunter. He's already thrown in a super chat on this video. And I imagine you guys are going to have some questions regarding the stuff we get into today. So feel free to ask anything that you're interested in. And again, thank you, Hunter. I really appreciate that. So where to start? I think the best place to start is what is a cult? And we're going to be looking at the sort of etymology of cult and how it's actually tied to the word culture. And this is going to be a key frame throughout this video. And so I want to reiterate something that I've talked about in previous videos, and that is how culture works. And so this is actually something that I spoke to with Justin Stam recently in regards to culture and how culture works. And so we're going to be getting into the sacred canopy. And that's what I want to first highlight is a cult is the root word for culture, and they have a unique culture. Well, then what is culture and how is culture created? Well, it's created by what I've talked about before in regards to a sacred canopy. This is a theory that was developed, but it's pretty much adopted. I mean, it's a great utility in regards to looking at sort of sociologically what culture is, how culture works. And so the sacred canopy theory developed by Peter Berger, an American scholar, sociologist, is that a culture, a society, has a sacred canopy, and within that canopy is meanings, it's language, it's usually race, ethnicity, it's tied to heroes, it's tied to myths, it's tied to and then how that's exemplified in monuments, it's tied to cultural achievements. And so all these things, humor, all this stuff is embedded within a sacred canopy, and that sacred canopy unifies all those different people and even subgroups within that culture. They're all unified under what's called a sacred canopy, and that sacred canopy is created through what's called the process of legitimation. The process of legitimation is when you externalize, you objectify something, and then because it's objectified, it's out in the world, it can then become internalized. And the internalization is then how it has been embedded within somebody's mind, within somebody's psyche, and then they, again, externalize it. So there's a feedback loop, and that feedback loop, again, is called the process of legitimation. So that is how culture works. That is really how all cults are formed. But a cult is, at least in the way that we're going to be talking about it today, usually the academic definition of a cult is a sort of divisive, a group that has a divisive or aberrant, here's the definition I wrote. A cult is a social group with aberrant religious, spiritual, philosophical beliefs to the dominant culture and engages in novel practices that then revalidate the identity of that cult. So in the way that it's used academically, cult, unfortunately, and you guys can guess why, is cult has become a sort of a problematic term within the academy. If you study religion, cult is deemed to be a pejorative term, right? You're putting down a group or a spiritual practice or a budding new religious movement or a religious group. Well, of course, scholars believe that because really, as we're going to highlight today, that whole institution is really in opposition to the dominant culture. And so anything that is really in opposition to that dominant culture, right, an aberrant social group with religious, spiritual, philosophical beliefs, that is a cult. And so I want to get into moving through these subcategories. So I don't expect this video to be this live stream to be super long, but it's fairly organized because I wrote all this stuff out. So there's so many different types of cults. And again, as I mentioned earlier, what I think is so astonishing is when you really take a sort of academic perspective and look at BLM, look at what's happening, it is more than just a cult or a single cult. It's really every type of subcategory that we use to identify cults, it's all of them. And so the first one that I want to talk about are destructive cults. Destructive cults. So what is a destructive cult? Well, the typical definition that people use to describe a destructive cult would be that they cause injury or kill either members of their own group or towards the general public. And so this is going to be wrapped with mind control. This is going to be understood in regards to a sort of manipulative nature in regards to that group, that cult. And so it's going to be tied to behavioral changes, loss of personal identity, estrangement from family, cessation of scholastic activity, or as we're going to identify, really just anything logical. And there's also usually, within a destructive cult, there's usually sexual abuse. Okay, so we're going to go through those one at a time because I think we really need to unpack all those dimensions that are applicable to what's called a destructive cult, And so I know one psychologist, his name is Michael Langone, and he has a quote that I wanted to highlight in regards to what are destructive cults, talking about destructive cults, and says that they are a highly manipulative group which exploits, sometimes physically and or psychologically damages its members. And so I want to begin by tying that to the sort of thumbnail that I used to create today's live stream. And so you probably saw a white woman with her septum pierced, with her sort of eyebrow, the sort of bridge pierced. And I put in, she has sort of like hypnotized eyes. I actually didn't put that in. I found it, but this is the beginning of what I see as a sort of psychological damaging of really the progressive movement in general. But I think BLM and how we're seeing this sort of prominence of it right in our face in society is what it's doing is encapsulating all these other groups. So if Jay Dyer, he's done great work in regards to sex cults in Hollywood and really talking about cults, sort of subversive groups in general, but also Primal Edge Health talked about the sort of veganism cult. I mean, absolutely the case. And so all these are really just subgroups of the larger cult that I'm trying to identify today as BLM. Because all those people that are going to be a part of those cults are really going to be a part of the BLM cult in general. So, unpacking this, the first one that I want to do is highlight the mental damage in allegiance versus logic. And so I'm sure one thing that was going around the internet that you guys may have saw was this white woman, again, part of a Black Lives Matter protest, screaming and yelling at a couple of black officers and really demonstrating a sort of racist mentality in the sense that she was so upset because they weren't doing what she said. She couldn't believe that they were officers, that they were upholding patriarchy, that they were upholding white supremacy. And the hypocrisy, as I did in a previous video talking about hypocrisy 2 streams ago, is always evil. It's always hypocrisy is always a front for evil. And so we see the sort of self-narcissism, we see the inability to even recognize what's the situation at hand. This is certainly the case for that woman in particular, where she is yelling at them and accusing them of being part of sort of a racist system when herself is actually engaging in racist, you could say a sort of racist perception or activity. Just because they're not doing what she wants. And so her allegiance to this group supersedes logic itself. And so at times I'm going to be throwing on 2 different hats, a sort of academic hat and then a sort of theological hat. The theological hat, again, tied to my previous stream on hypocrisy itself, being a front for evil, creating false images of light in which darkness can actually hide behind, is that we see a sort of mental damage. Seriously, I seriously believe this. And I think without a concept or an anthropology of the noose, it doesn't quite resonate or make as much sense. So with an anthropology of the noose, with the eyes of the heart, the eyes of the soul, in which can only be purified and clarified through more righteous living, if you will, just living correctly in general, that you can't even see truth. You can't even see right from wrong. You can't even see what's actually going on. And I think this is the case with so many people we're seeing, that the hypocrisy, the inability to recognize anything is a sort of mental damage. And we see that with their inability to engage in dialogue. For example, I saw a video going around Twitter today. You guys may have saw it also, of a black woman, probably 20-something, yelling and screaming at 2 older black gentlemen in Washington, D.C., who actually are part of, they put on trips, tourist demonstrations of Washington, D.C. about black culture, showing about black history within Washington, D.C., and how they were trying to prevent her, or at least even maybe just talk to her, but they were just standing where that Abraham Lincoln Emancipation statue is located within Washington, D.C. that everybody wants to tear down. Of course, they've erected a fence around it at this point. But she's engaging with them, just yelling and screaming, can't hear anything that they're saying. And you see an allegiance to BLM over any sort of rational dialogue, any sort of logical conclusions, even hearing these older gentlemen out who are actually sophisticated, very knowledgeable of black history within Washington, D.C. Yeah, I see mind virus. It's absolutely a mind virus. And so this is just one dimension of what's called a destructive cult, is that it's destructive in the sense that it's tearing down the individual. Of course, all these cults are to a degree, but we see this most evidently in what's called a destructive cult. And so related to that is behavioral changes. So most scholars, when they identify a destructive cult, and so for an example, well, what would be a destructive cult? Well, you could just look at Osho, and he's going to be coming back up in some of our conversations today. But you could look at Jim Jones. You could look at David Koresh. You could look at Osho. And if you guys haven't seen the documentary on Netflix called Wild Wild Country, I highly, highly recommend you guys check that out, because it is really a microcosm. That is what's called a destructive cult, but it's really a microcosm of what I'm talking about now that I think would be beneficial for you guys to watch and look at in person. So I do recommend checking that out. So behavioral changes. We're certainly seeing behavioral changes, I think, tied to, I think, more symptomatic of the BLM is really the forefront. It's sort of the crux of where all these cultic forces have been leading society. Again, this is tied to veganism. This is tied to stuff that Dyer's been talking about for years. But we see all this stuff is really just being umbrellaed within BLM. And so behavioral changes is certainly one of the things that this cult is demanding, right? It's demanding. And I'm going to get into performative rituals later as some of the key characteristics as a cult, because we're going to be getting into charismatic leadership and who I identify as the charismatic leaders of this cult. Sacred text. I'm going to talk about a sacred text, and one that I think highlights or embodies a lot of the ideology behind this cult, and sort of performative rituals. And so behavioral changes is going to be tied to sort of language and how we talk. We see all these demands behind BLM, again, in its opposition to the dominant culture. And so, again, we've seen so many people, and it's fairly obvious that, okay, this is a cult. People saying this is a cult. And I'm going to give more teeth to this, but we have to, again, keep in mind that the cult is creating culture. It's creating culture, and that culture is in opposition to the dominant culture. Well, what is the dominant culture? Well, certainly, it's not just secularism. It's not just Americanism. It's not just these things. It's Christian culture. It's Christianity itself. Because as you guys are aware, who are fans of Dyer, who are fans of some of the Orthodox stuff going on, that, we're talking about presuppositions, paradigms, paradigmatic analysis of different worldviews and ideologies, is that what we believe to be true is embedded within a Christian worldview. And so I've talked about phallogocentrism and Jacques Derrida, the famous deconstructionalist French intellectual of the 1960s, really a promoter of postmodernism, relative understandings, and how what he thought had to be destroyed in the West was phallogocentrism. So the masculine emphasis of Western civilization in the worship and celebration of all the presuppositions that come into play through our understanding that the Logos incarnated in Jesus Christ. And so the Logos has ties to objective understandings of truth, the way that language actually reflects reality, order, beauty. All these things are in opposition to the cult we see at hand. BLM is an embodiment of all these things that have been at play for really hundreds of years. But we see, because postmodernism or relativistic epistemology, these things aren't new just in the 1960s. These have been brewing under the surface for a long time. And so we see BLM, again, just an embodiment of all these presuppositions, that is really in opposition to phallogocentrism. That's why you hear them always talking about the patriarchy. That's why their worldview is tied to a relativistic understanding of epistemology. Everything is then rooted in emotionalism, where in our worldview, the Bible is fairly clear to not be led by your emotions. The emotions will lead you astray. And yet at the same time, that's exactly how they argue to lead oneself, to lead one's life. It's just how you feel, bro. And so you need to allow people to be themselves, right? Express themselves and all these different things. Now, tied to these behavioral changes that they're demanding, again, these are just dimensions within the destructive cult. We have all these other cults to get into still, is the loss of personal identity. And I think this is exactly something that we see. I think this is a larger phenomenon with masks themselves. I think masks and the people who are buying, because to me, any rational thinker, anybody who's really trying to understand what's going on, understands the sort of hypocrisy in regards to these BLM protests, the use of these masks, and how, oh, well, this very special virus didn't affect any of the cities and where that had massive protests. Multiple publications have been posting this type of stuff. Whereas, again, I'm very critical. I almost want to do a whole stream just on how weak Trump is and talk about, from a biblical standpoint, the characteristics of a leader and how he has failed basically in every one of those. But we see then how Trump held his rally in Oklahoma, and then we see multiple articles about, Oklahoma is having the largest spike, when in reality, that's quite the opposite. And again, it's all propaganda and this and that. But the loss of personal identity is quite, to me, it's quite apparent within this cult, because it's not about persons, right? Our understanding of Christian theology is personhood, operations, essence, right? This is the orthodox ordo theologiae, or the correct order of theology based on a revealed understanding of reality. That, no, we see everybody is really just a member of a subgroup. They're either white, they're black, they're this or that. And there is no sort of personal identity there. And I think that's also tied, like I was trying to highlight with these masks, I almost think that it's people who are ashamed of themselves. That people who have shame are much more reticent to adopt these mandatory mask laws, because inside that sort of ability to help cover oneself up, I think, is an expression of shame. And we see people being ashamed of Western culture. Now, we can get into post-Enlightenment secularistic things that we would be in opposition to, but there's also a lot to be proud about regarding Western civilization, like a Shakespeare, like the beautiful art, like classical music. Now, we can, again, say, well, this person was a Mason, this person was that, and be in opposition to those, but we also have to recognize beauty. And again, from our theology of logos, understanding beauty, that it has an objective quality. And when we look at classical music, when we look at some of the art that's been produced, this is objectively beautiful. There is God within this stuff. And this must be protected, and it's worth defending. And so we see, again, this is all part of a sort of loss of personal identity. This is, again, a central feature of a destructive cult. It's the destroying of the person, the destroying of the individual image. And then tied to that is the estrangement from family. This is a common characteristic of cults, unless your family's in the cult. But this is something that's actually absolutely been true. We've seen posts on social media demanding people that they need to realize that they need to kick out people who are conservative, or they're Trump supporters, or that they're promoting patriarchy or white supremacy. And so this is a common facet of what we're seeing, is the estrangement of family. And I actually have a very personal story to say about this stuff. I do want to say, hey guys, if you haven't, please like and share this video. Please give this video a like if you haven't. I would greatly, greatly appreciate that. It helps the video get promoted on YouTube. But in regards to my personal story regarding the estrangement from family, is my mother recently called me in regards to her aunt, or my great aunt, and how she is a big Trump supporter. She's Christian, she's Protestant, but she holds her values. And unfortunately, her children just came out and attacked her. Basically said because she is promoting a sort of more traditional worldview, one of her children are homosexual, and she's, she deals with that. They've adopted a little boy, and so she has spent time with them. She knows his partner. She may, at a theological level, believe that it has an element of sin, but she still loves them, right? That's her son. And so she was greatly hurt when basically all her children have said that she doesn't exude Christian qualities because of her criticism of BLM, right? Because she doesn't support BLM, again, I'm saying this is a cult, that her children basically attacked her, belittled her, made her feel little, threatened ostracization. I mean, this happened within my own family. Now, I feel extremely thankful because I come on here and I rant and rave and talk about my opinion, but the people who are closest to me, they all support my worldview. Now, I have friends, they're not Christian, but again, they're on the right side of all this stuff. And my immediate family, they're all on the same side as myself. And even my parish, I feel so thankful after having conversations with fellow guys, ortho bros, that that I have a parish that supports what I do here online and promotes a traditional worldview. Now, you'd think, well, that's obvious, right? You're Orthodox, you go to an Orthodox church, don't they? Unfortunately, I think what all of us have seen, that the mess within Orthodoxy is a little bit more chaotic and complex than we initially thought. And I think this really actually causes us to have some sympathies with our Catholic brothers and sisters. Now, we can agree or disagree with elements of their theology, this or that, and we can make arguments for that. But as Christians who worship the triune God, the only God, the creator of creation, I think this is a time in which we need to be much more sympathetic to our brothers and sisters within the Christian faith who are actually upholding traditional values, because I feel I have more in line with a Catholic who is upholding a traditional Christian worldview than somebody like members of my own parish who go and march with BLM and promote a lot of this democratic, this progressive propaganda. Again, part of a cult, because the internal conflict of those values should be obvious to everybody, but it's not. And so it's just we have to sort of build alliances with those who have the main crux of the value system. Now, again, we can hash out theological differences, I think, later at a different time, but based on what's happening, based that this, again, cult is in opposition to Christendom, we need to have some sort of sympathy and alliance with our brothers and sisters. And so the estrangement from family, it wasn't just my great aunt. It was my mother told me that also one of her good friends, very, very devout Christian, beautiful person to be around. She mentioned that her own daughter, big supporter of BLM, and told her mother, because she's always quoting scripture, her whole worldview is rooted within scripture. Now she's Protestant, but again, she upholds a traditional worldview. I have more in line with her than somebody that goes to an Orthodox church that promotes degeneracy. And her daughter told her to stop talking about Christianity and how she's mean and all this stuff, and basically, again, ostracize her, doesn't want to talk to her, doesn't want to speak with her because of her criticism of BLM as being evil. That's what she was talking about. She was using the Bible to talk about how BLM is really a front for satanic evil, which I think most of us would agree with. And her daughter was so upset that she doesn't even want to speak to her. And again, this to me is a characteristic of a cult, So I'll move on. Now, the cessation of scholastic activity is a dimension of usually destructive cults in regards to there is no sort of critical, academic, or logical element to it. It begins to become internally contradicting and all this stuff. So when we look at BLM and we look at the fact that there's an open slave trade in Libya right now, that there's more slaves that exist today, given that there's 8 billion people on the planet, that there's more slaves that exist and are sold today than have ever existed. And yet we're told about, the problems of the white man in slavery, this or that. Well, that's a serious contradiction that you're literally neglecting, rejecting, closing your eyes to an open slave trade in Libya right now. Now, what is going on? That makes zero sense. And so I think I'm not even going to go down it because I talked about hypocrisy in a previous live stream. I don't even need to go down some of the hypocrisies and the contradicting elements that we're seeing within the society. But this is a dimension. And again, from a theological standpoint, so putting back on the theological hat, logic is an energy of the logos. It's an uncreated energy. And so if you aren't using reason and logic, not that those things are God in of themselves, because we see where that goes with the French Revolution, which obviously has elements with what's going on here. But if you are in opposition to logic and reason itself, you are working for Satan. I mean, because that is a way, that is a mechanism, that is an uncreated energy of the logos. And that is what this is all about. That is what this is all about. And so the last dimension of a destructive cult is sex abuse. And so maybe this isn't the most obvious of things. I think when I get to the sex and polygamous cults, I'm going to get into a lot of the sexual immorality from our perspective that we're seeing, and how that is, again, a central facet and dimension of this cult. So sexual abuse, I think the fact that they are normalizing what we would consider degenerate or immoral forms of sexual activity, or here is a specific element in sort of how Pornhub, right, promotes this movement, right? BLM, this cult, is promoted by the institutions. And so we have to be a little bit careful because the academic definition I gave you guys for cults is sort of an opposition, right? It's the idea that, well, a cult is just something that's trying to create a culture that's really in opposition to the central elements which create culture, to the dominant society. So if all the institutions, if the majority of people are in support of BLM, well, isn't that the dominant society? Isn't it? Wouldn't we be the cult? Well, that's why we need to be careful there, because the idea in regards to the historicity, right? This is a historical revolution. We are living in history, guys. And that's why I'm always trying to get across the severity of what is going on. This isn't a joke. This is not a joke. We need to wake up. We need to realize where this stuff is going. And so the sexual abuse, the promotion of pornography, the promotion of really sex slavery, right, by Pornhub, all these different women who claim that they were raped live on these these various porn videos, and this is sexual abuse. Yet somehow the institutions, the powers that be that support this movement, are all okay with that. The only outcry you're hearing of people talking about Pornhub and all are mostly on the opposite side of this dialectic, right? Of this sort of culture war, of this, it is a culture war, right? Because what's the root word of culture? So that basically sums up my discussion of a destructive cult. Now I want to move into a doomsday cult, right? So we've talked about it. Clearly, BLM has destructive elements. It's destroying society. It's destroying individuals, right? It's not just, so that, as I was trying to highlight with the destructive cults don't just destroy its members and sort of their psychological, their individuality, right? Sexual abuse, all this stuff, which is certainly true. And we see that displayed. That's why I used the thumbnail I did of white women, half their head shaved. They got eyebrow piercing. They got a septum piercing, all this stuff. This is, to me, a scarification of oneself. This is all symptomatic of somebody buying in, sort of being hypnotized by the mind control of this cult. So, well, let's get into a doomsday cult. Well, hold on. What I was trying to say, let me finish my thought. With the destructive cult is that it's also destructive towards the general public and the society in which they're in opposition to. That is obvious with what we're seeing, right? So the fact they're attacking people, this or that, the destructive cult, check. All qualities checked off there. All qualities of a destructive cult checked off in regards to BLM. Now, what's the next one? Doomsday cults. Well, Patrick, that doesn't seem like that'd be too applicable. I mean, I don't hear them talking about the apocalypse. I don't hear them talking about the second coming of Christ. I don't hear them talking about meteors that are going to destroy Earth. Certainly, there's a sort of apocalyptic element to their global climate change rhetoric. But actually, this is the definition that I wrote down for a doomsday cult. It's a cult that believes in an apocalyptic or millenarian end applied to groups who both predict or actively try to bring it about. And so this is a categorization. And the reason why I'm familiar with a lot of this stuff is because I studied new religious movements. And so cults are certainly a dimension of new religious movements, and how you define a new religious movement from a cult is actually quite difficult. And there's a large debate within that. And that's why the academics, these progressive people, hate using the word cults, and they're trying to normalize cult as a good thing. But how does BLM fit the Doomsday cult construction? And the point, they do, because they're millenarian. So there's a difference between what's called millenarianism and apocalypticism. Apocalypticism is where something traumatic, something stressful, something sort of destructive has to occur for then what comes right after that. Whereas in a millenarian understanding, it's utopia. You have to destroy something for utopia to occur. So it's a very hopeful. It's a different sort of. It doesn't have that same sort of scariness as an apocalyptic understanding of the future does. Millenarianism is much more hopeful, and I think from that perspective, once we see that BLM is absolutely millenarian. In fact, this is a characteristic of American culture itself through the various Christian waves. In American history, we've had a lot of Christian sects, cults that were very millenarian, some apocalyptic, but many were a millenarian. And this is exactly what we see with BLM, is that they have to redesign society. They have to reinterpret things. They have to reconstruct monuments and statues and this or that for utopia to occur. And that's what they really believe. They believe utopia will occur. So this is a classic millenarian understanding of time, of the future, right? That we're on a timeline in which now if we just destroy certain things, if we change certain things, if we, again, the definition, the way you identify a doomsday cult is if they predict or actively try to bring it about. What are we seeing in society? They're actively trying to bring about the millenarian utopian envisionment of really globalism. And that's why it's tied to planetary understandings of the environment, right? Global climate change, the white man, patriarchy. And so where's all this stuff tied together is really that it's a regression, and I talked about this before, back to paganism. This is why the veneration, the anti-patriarchy sentiments, again, tied to phallogocentrism, which we have to stop apologizing for, right? You cannot, if somebody says that you're supporting the patriarchy, if you defend yourself from that, you've already lost and you're part of the problem. We have to stand up for what we believe in, and if we are Christians, that is not that's not an ad hominem or a negative. You say yes, absolutely, duh. That's the nature of society, and that's reflected in the family. And then from a Christian perspective, that's going to be related to how we understand monarchy to be as well. But the utopian envisionment tied to BLM, the millenarian understanding, is really a regression back to paganism. It's back to goddess worshiping, nature. And once you see this, it's impossible not to see. That's why they promote the ideas that they do. What are common characteristics of goddess cults, goddess tribal traditions? What we would consider sexual immorality. So typically orgiastic activity in regards to full moon activity, magic, this type of stuff. These are common elements of a goddess worshiping tribal tradition. Well, this is exactly what they're moving towards. This is what they want. So it's not that they're against the patriarchy. They are against the patriarchy. But what I'm trying to highlight is why that is more than just, we want equality. No, it's about regression. It's about going back to a goddess feminized society in which I could easily see this is the destruction of the nuclear family, which you hear them advocating for openly, and you see CNN articles and all the sort of mainstream publications already talking about it, is that the nuclear family needs to be destroyed, that it's, again, a symbol of patriarchy, which it is, but we have to be proud of that. We cannot shy away from that at all anymore, at all. Same thing if you're called a racist. Not that you
I mean, first of all, we don't even know what they mean by racist. So race realism is something that we should all uphold. That doesn't mean you're a racist. God created everybody. We're Christians. God created everybody. So by being Christian, you aren't a racist in that same way. But races are different. That's race realism. And they even support that. But if you say that as the wrong ethnic group, then you are racist. But if they say it as their ethnic group, well, then that's obvious. That's just the fact of nature. And so I just want to highlight that a deeper element of all this stuff in regards to the breakup of the nuclear family is a aspect of goddess paganized tribal traditions is that they try to do away with male paternity. So again, if you exist within a tribal goddess worshiping tradition and at the full moon you tend to have tribal orgies, well, nobody's going to know who the father is of the various children that women are impregnated. So that then leads to a matriarchal tradition. Why? Because men, they don't even know whose children is theirs. This is the root of their criticism of the nuclear family. And you have to see this. Once you see this, now you can actually defend yourself and you can argue against it. But this is the root. They don't want male paternity because if you take away male paternity and men don't know which children are theirs, all the power goes to the mother. All the power goes to a matriarchy. And that is reflective then usually in a goddess worshiping tradition, which then venerates the moon. It's going to be more emotional. It's going to be tied to all these different things that a logos-centered worldview is in opposition to. And so that basically sums up my Doomsday cult in the sense that they are millenarian. So Doomsday is really, even though that is the categorical term used for these things, it's not really a doomsday. It's it'd be more applicable if you call that a utopian cult, is that they have to destroy society so then they can create utopia. Of course, we as Christians don't believe in a utopia, and I've talked before about how these abstract general concepts about the world, right? Utopia, love, equality, justice, these are all manipulations of evil because the only way those things are interacted is through person to person, which again, they are in opposition to because they destroy the concept of persons for groups, for generalities, for abstractions. So the Doomsday cult it's because they are millenarian. So they check, okay, do they have millenarian beliefs? They check the millenarian beliefs. Or do they predict or actively try to bring this about? Absolutely. Absolutely. So check in regards to the definition of a doomsday cult. Now, do they, in regards to bringing about, what are they doing? Well, they're destroying statues, they're destroying monuments, they're destroying businesses. All this stuff is a part of collapsing the system, whether they're conscious of it or not, because I believe, again, evil's behind all this stuff. That is exactly how you go about it. And so we already have all the categories of a destructive cult checked. Absolutely. Now, all the categories of a doomsday cult, check. They absolutely check those off. And so for the doomsday, it's not apocalyptic. It's not really a doomsday. It's a utopian millenarianism, which is a related concept. And so if you guys aren't familiar, just Google apocalypticism versus millenarianism if you want to learn more about that. Okay, so those are the first two subcategories that I wanted to highlight. Doomsday, destructive, both check. What about a political cult? Because there's political cults out there, and this has been tied to sort of Trotsky. So it's very common within academia in regards to identifying political cults to actually identify radical leftist Trotskyite cults in the 70s and 80s. So this was not controversial. This was a very common occurrence even within the academy, despite, again, their general leftist bent. They weren't communists. They weren't Bolsheviks. Of course, they are now. And so I just wanted to highlight that, okay, political cults, this is a category, this is a dimension that has been used quite a bit. And in the 70s and 80s, identifying Trotskyite cults was a common phenomenon. Yes, gun rights and human rights. Yes. So, what is a political cult? Well, the definition of a political cult is a cult with a primary interest in political action or ideology. So they have a primary interest in political control, political action, and ideology. This goes without saying with what we're seeing with BLM. This goes without saying. And I think, even though, again, I'm extremely, extremely critical of Trump and his weakness, his absolutely ineptitude during all the series of these events, but I think why Biden's numbers are rising, and I know this is controversial, but only the MAGA-tards believe that Trump's numbers aren't going down. They absolutely are going down. I know people who are devout Trump supporters who are so irate with his behavior or his inability, and so the fact that his popularity has gone down and Biden's has gone up, I think is tied not to the doings of Biden or being a good candidate. It's because people are buying into the political element of this cult. And I want to highlight that even though I'm getting into destructive, doomsday, political, sex cults, racist cults, all this stuff, you only have to buy into one aspect of it. You only have to buy into one dimension of these subcategories of cults to be part of the BLM movement and already be in opposition to Christendom, to the values, the presuppositions, everything we hold to believe true and good, they are in opposition to. And so maybe you're not a millenarian BLM supporter who believes that a utopian future is going to occur if they destroy Christian civilization. Maybe you're also not part, maybe you still have a sort of individuality, of course not much if you fall victim to any of this stuff, but you're not estranged from your family, you haven't gone through the sort of scarification and behavioral modification, or you haven't had sexual abuse, so you don't really fit the destructive cult elements, but you fit the political elements. So you don't fit any of that stuff, but you buy into it politically. You're a progressive, you're a Democrat, you're a leftist. Well, you're already part of it. You've already bought in. And so the radical adherence to an extreme position is the central element of a political cult. So that's why in the 70s and 80s, again, we had the Cold War going on. It wasn't as far away from World War II. And so the dichotomy between capitalism and communism, the West and the East, this type of thing was very fresh in the psyche and minds of people. So it's no wonder then, even in the academy, that they weren't as reluctant to categorize Trotskyite or Marxist worldviews or Bolshevik ideology as cultish, and they would highlight that these political cults have an adherence to an extreme position. That's exactly what we see here. We see how, and this was already, we already saw it with, the AOCs of the world, the Talibs, the Ilhan Omars, where even though, again, they may represent ideologies who aren't supposed to be so progressive, of course they actually are, and they're facades for what the ideologies they say they represent, like in Islam. But, we already saw what's called the Democrats or the political left already moving in an extreme position. Now with BLM, it's a radical adherence to the extreme position. If you don't adhere to the extreme position, they don't want you, because you're perpetuating, again, the leftist end of the old system. They want a new system. This is the cult. This is a political cult. It's all about radical adherence to an extreme position. That's exactly what we see there. And so again, I say because that is the central element of political cult, is radical adherence, and that the cult has the central interest is a sort of political action or ideology. So again, a totally different subcategory of cults, and they still qualify. So that was really all I wanted to say about the political cults. Now I want to move on to the next subcategory, and that is sex cults and polygamous cults. Sex and polygamous cults. Now, polygamy that's been used really to describe, this category has really been used to describe Mormonism and stuff like that as a new religious movement, because that was actually a debate for a while within religious studies is the definition of Mormonism. And is that a cult? Is it not? Is it a new religious movement? Is it not? And so the category here has usually been used to define Mormonism, at least in regards to the polygamous elements. I'm going to reject all that, and polygamy is just going to be one subset. It's just going to be a bullet point within what I'm calling this as a sex cult. And what do I mean by a sex cult? Well, first, what is a sex cult? A sex cult is a cult that teach and support aberrant sexual practices compared to the dominant culture. So a sex cult is a cult that teaches and supports aberrant sexual practices compared to the dominant culture. I'm sure you guys are already connecting some dots. So, you don't need me to sort of spell this out, though I will. In regards to, let's see the first one. Again, this is all institutionally backed, guys. And this is where I totally agree with Jay Dyer, and he can wax more eloquently on this stuff in regards to the Fortune 100s, the Fortune 500s, the transnational corporations, the globalist think tanks and foundations that are behind all this, again, because it's all just a front for evil. But the sex cult, the first one, is the support for LGBTQ. Now we know that they're not more than 3%. If I'll be generous and give them 4%, just because it seems like, you're seeing more people identify in that group. Is that not a central feature of this cult? Have we not already seen videos of black people getting upset because the black power fist, the black pride fist, is being put on trans flags, on LGBTQ flags, on all this, what we would call sexual degeneracy? Yeah, it absolutely is. So how is it that that the LGBTQ is such a central force within this BLM movement? I mean, you can't get on. You can't even get on. Like, I got a message. I have an iPhone, right? And Apple sends you news all the time. What was today's? Oh, how we have to defend black trans rights. Black trans rights are under attack. What? How many black trans are there in this country? There can't be that many. And yet that is the proclamation, that is the number one message of today's, again, institutionally backed sex cult, is that we have to support black trans rights. Again, all made by God in the image of God, but through their free will, they've chose evil. And that's what the sex cult is it's trying to get you to buy into all that propaganda. And so polygamy is just one of them. And I'd say cuckolding, all that stuff is really a sub-genre of the sex cult. And so the sex cult elements, no wonder they push the pornography. No wonder, again, and then the destructive cults are usually tied to sexual abuse. And I think that's what, again, regards to the sex cult, that's what a lot of it is. It is a sort of sexual abuse. The promotion of sodomy over and over and over. I mean, when you watch these videos, a lot of these men, these white guys that are there, a lot of them are sodomites. You can hear it in their voice, right? They're weak, effeminate men who, I'm not even going to go into it, but the sex cult element is it's so noticeable. Once you see that, you can't disagree with me there. It absolutely has a sex cult element. We see that again in the flags that they fly, the LGBTQ, the trans flag, and look what month we're in. It's disgusting. It's frustrating. That's why I enjoy coming on here and ranting and raving to you guys, because it's like-minded individuals wanting to do something that's more holy, more sacred, that's just trying to live our lives in the right way. But the sex cult element is so obvious. And so does BLM, does the embodiment of this movement, do they, because this is the definition, do they support or teach aberrant sexual practices compared to the dominant culture? No question. No question. And so polygamy, like I said, I see that tied to cuckolding and the porn addiction and all that stuff. Because if they get you tied to porn addiction, if they get tied to get you tied to some sexual fetish, where do you think you're going to be on the side of all this stuff? You're going to support BLM. And again, that's what I'm trying to say is all these different cults, these subcategories, and I still have racist and terrorist cults to go through yet. If you are fit into any of those, you're going to be part of the movement. And that's why it's so expansive. It's such a large embodiment of all cults. Because if you are just susceptible to one of them, then you're a part of the movement. And I think that's why it seems like we're up against a Goliath here. It's not only backed by the institutions, it seems like the majority of society is falling victim to it. And so, tied to the sex cult is, of course, pedophilia. Pedophilia. We all know it. We see it. We absolutely see it. We know what's going on in Hollywood. We know what Epstein Island was about. And what I want to highlight here is the black stripe, because this has been becoming more and more obvious. When you look for the pride flag at these movements, at these rallies, does it have a black stripe on it? Does it have a black stripe on it? If it does, that is a symbol for pedophilia, guys. That is what they call minority attracted individuals, or minor attracted individuals, not minority, minor attracted individuals. Guys, think of how many progressive YouTubers and stuff have been caught with child porn. Guys, that is absolutely part of this movement, is going to be the normalization of pedophilia. It's already trying to be normal. We see that. We see it. But that's why I'm just trying to highlight that this is a central characteristic of a sex cult. And we see it. It's right in our face. And so if you're a YouTube creator, for example, and you go to your YouTube studio, the first thing you see is an image of talking about supporting Pride Month. And what do you see? You see a pride flag with a black stripe in it. And then you see the trans flag next to it. What, guys, this is backed by the institutions. Of course, you already know this, but this is serious stuff. This is absolutely serious stuff, in my opinion. So, well, your opinion too. And then, of course, furries, right? I highlighted that because it's so freaking strange. But you guys have probably saw how some furry or whatever, I have no idea. I don't follow that stuff, but I know people who are gamers and stuff are usually more familiar with all that. But got caught for having tons and tons of child pornography. Because these degenerate sexual fetishes, they always have to get a bigger high. And where do you think that leads to? Where do you think that leads to? It leads to pedophilia. That is the ultimate high for these degenerates, because it's the ultimate evil. It's destroying of one's soul. It scars that individual for the rest of their lives, the victim of the pedophilia. And then we live in a society, we live in a country that won't even prosecute these people. Why? Because most of them are that. And so I know I run a risk of getting my YouTube channel shut down just by talking about this stuff and saying it's evil. That's how bad things have gotten. And so if we don't recognize the sex cult element of this, we're blind. And so for the fourth subcategory, we have the destructive cults, we have the doomsday cults, we have the political cult element, and then we have the sexual cult element. Again, usually all these things are different. These aren't usually, one cult doesn't usually categorize in all these different things. Usually one of these subcategories categorizes an entire cult. Not this one. It's all of them. Why? Because if you're susceptible to any of it, then you're going to be part of the movement. And so what's the next cult, the fifth subcategory? Racist cults. What is a racist cult? It's a cult whose identity is directly in opposition to any particular race or ethnicity. Okay. So a racist cult is any cult whose identity is directly oppositional to any particular race or ethnicity. I think this is quite obvious. What's going on here. Again, we see the anti-white sentiments, the white man bad, white people bad, even though a large portion of these BLM supporters are white. Why? Because that ties back into the destructive cult element from earlier in regards to the shame. They have no self-pride. They have no real sense of self, no sorts of individuality, no real personhood. They are automatons. They really are. And so the destructive cult element has already warped their mind, their psychology. And they, even though they're white, they have self-shame. And you saw this, I think it was in Washington or Seattle, where the guys lynched themselves. You saw a bunch of white guys literally cut open their backs. Why? You didn't own a slave? Your parents didn't own a slave? There's no black person in America, unless they came from Africa, that was a slave. What are you doing? Where is all this resentment coming from? It's because you're psychologically damaged, and it's because you are buying into the element of the racist cult. And so this, I think, allows for a very easy dialectic, right? That if you're not for Black lives, this is why they hate people who say all lives matter. Well, if all lives matter, that goes directly in opposition to, again, a racist cult ideology, because their ideology, their identity is in opposition to a particular race or group. Well, that's quite clear. And what do we see that was going around? It kind of went viral. I know it was being shared on Twitter and various social media. Was the guy he had a YouTube video that's now been taken down, advocating about how, again, the millenarianism, the utopian future, the real change they want to occur won't until they kill white people. And again, even the idea of white people isn't really a strong concept, right? Because Europe, Germanics, Anglos, French, the Scandinavians, the Slavs, right? These are all white people. They have totally different histories, different language, different sacred canopies. But because of the melanin in their skin, or lack thereof, they're all one big group. And so by doing this, we see, in the destructive cult element of the lack of personhood, right? You're not killing an individual. You're not attacking an individual. You're attacking the group. And that group is responsible for oppressing your group. Whether it's true or not, that is the mind frame. That is the ideology here. And I think, once you see this, it's so obvious that it's excruciating, and and that's why I think some of us who are Christians, we've seen all this stuff, and it's like, where is everybody? How is other people not seeing this stuff? How are they not seeing this? It's so obvious and in our face. It's infuriating, really, if you ask me. So, anyways, they talk about killing white people. And why do you have to kill white people? Because white people are the only ones that can actually be racist. Now, if you were a racist cult, and I talked about how this sort of dialectic between people of color and white people is really, it goes way deeper in regards to, for example, we just saw the vaccines for COVID just come out. Where did they go immediately? They went to Africa. So the same people telling us that Black Lives Matters and this or that, where do they go to test their untested and unproven vaccine that's going to be filled with all this degenerate stuff? They go to Africa. Why? Because they are the most racist people. And just like the girl that I was highlighting earlier yelling at the black police officers, she's exuding way more racism than the white man who's also a police officer standing next to a black guy who's also a police officer. Even though in their eyes, they're the racist, they're the patriarchy, that they have to abolish and destroy. And so the inherent racism within white people, it skews the playing field, right? Because then they can't be racist, even though they are, by definition, what's called a racist cult. So if you were to take just an academic rubric of what a racist cult is and try to identify one, well, they would fit the category, as I'm trying to highlight. But because of the rhetoric, because of the language games they play, only white people can be racist. And, even if they aren't racist, you know why they are racist? It's because they're inherently racist. And so therefore they have to reject their inherent privilege and their inherent racism and all this stuff. Guys, it's a game. It's a game being played by a racist cult. That's what it is. And that's why the cult's name has a color in it, I think. Is it's not this, because I don't see this stuff as being totally organic. Again, because I take a theological perspective, so I think there's always this massive hierarchy, and which ultimately leads to Satan himself. But that's what this thing is. So the dimensions of a racist cult, do they qualify? Absolutely, every single one of them. Every single element of what a racist cult is applies to BLM. Okay, and now to my last subcategory of a cult. And let me check the chat here real quick, guys. Just give me 1 second. Okay, let me check the chat. Everything's going on. Looks like everything's good, right? Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so the last subcategory of a cult that we are seeing is the terrorist cult. Now, what is a terrorist cult? A terrorist cult is a cult who actively aim and attempt to cause terror in the public sphere or aim at a particular group or nation. And so the sort of academic example of a political or a terrorist cult is usually like Wahhabism and Islam. So the sort of radical Islamic terrorism is usually used to identify a terrorist cult within scholarship, but it goes way deeper than that. And so let's just go over the definition again. A cult who actively aim and attempt to cause terror in the public sphere or aim that terror at a particular group or nation. Okay, so is BLM, is this phenomenon in culture, is it causing terror? Is it aimed to cause terror? Is it directed at any particular group? Is it occurring in the public sphere? Of course it is. Of course it is. So the first one, and I bet this is a hot word. I bet this video will be demonetized. I have no idea. But the idea that Antifa isn't a terrorist organization, absolutely, it's a domestic terrorist organization. And even the normie conservatives have been clamoring. Of course, they won't do anything. Nobody in the Senate will actually do anything, or the House. I honestly see no, and I repeat that, no single person in politics, that's already been elected. No elected official that is representing our voice, the voice of the people. I don't see a single one. You can point to Josh Hawley and his talk about, China, this or that. No way. Absolutely not. So, Antifa, domestic cult, of course, or domestic terror group, of course. That's obvious. Now, how are they implementing this stuff? Well, one of them shot Steve Scalise, what was that, 2 or 3 years ago or something? But the looting, I'm talking about in the present moment, looting, burning down businesses. This classic characteristic of a terrorist cult. Now, what did the radical Islamists do on 9/11? Of course, we know that there was way more than just planes. And again, I'll probably get this video taken down, but they burnt down or destroyed buildings, right? Just to bring it down at its sort of rudimentary level, they broke down and burned down or destroyed buildings. Okay, and that was a cause for a war against terrorism. Now we see looting and destroying of private businesses, burning down buildings. That is an act of terror. That is a classic element of a terrorist cult. When you look at the looting, you can see the violence. I mean, it's right in your face. So what else? Well, how about the jumping on people's cars? I don't know if you guys, every now and again, I'll check out Tucker Carlson and his monologue, because it seems like he's the only one attempting at all to speak about some truth right now. Again, even though he's on a network that I don't trust at all. But he played, the last one I saw, he played an audio of a woman who was calling 911 because the BLM supporters and protesters were stomping and jumping up and down on her car, causing her little daughter to cry in fear. And of course, the police weren't going to come save her. They weren't going to do anything. Why? Because they're busy. Sadly, the bureaucracy's preventing them from doing anything. But jumping on people's cars, I mean, scaring people in public, getting in front of people. We saw in Louisville, again, I mentioned this in a previous stream. I'm in Indianapolis, so Louisville's not very far away, but a woman driving her car, again, confronted by all these black guys, these BLM protesters. And then what do? They start trying to get in her car. They start trying to open her door. They start trying to smash her window. What does she do? She drives away, hits one of them, and he does a somersault. And we see Newsweek then say how she was a white supremacist trying to run black people over. And then we see the actual headline that she was scared out of her life because she was a white woman and she was being attacked by these guys. This is symptomatic of a terrorist cult. Now, the public acts of violence, quite obvious at this point. How many people have been beat up, harassed, humiliated in public, and nothing happens, right? Nothing happens. And what's so sad is how this is all so institutionally backed. We've already seen how the AGs, multiple institutional forces won't even press charges against these individuals in the cities in which they're really occurring, like in New York, like in California, like in Illinois. So the public acts of violence, I'd say burning flags, even though, again, I understand the problems with the sort of Americanism, the sort of American empire. I'm no fan of the FBI or the CIA or the NSA or this or that. I mean, it seems like every institution in America is subverted. It's degenerate. It promotes really what I'm calling the sex cult, right? The sex cult element. Because the whole point of this video is to show that all these cults are one massive cult. And the public acts of violence we see over and over. I mean, that's one of the easiest ones. So what is another central element of a terrorist cult, is that they ignore the ethical, cultural, moral, and religious codes of the dominant society. And I'll repeat that again. A very common element or dimension of a terrorist cult is that they ignore the ethical, cultural, moral, and religious codes of a dominant society. That is exactly what we're seeing. And another central element in regards to that force that is ignoring all, the sort of norms of the dominant culture is a puritanical conformity. This is a central element. It's usually a central element of most cults, but if you look into terrorist cults, usually that is one of them, because the acts that they're engaging with are so out in the open. They can cause them to be killed. This is another part of the terrorist cult, is that there's no real sense of self, or at least self-sacrifice is on the table. And because that's on the table, there is puritanical conformity. Well, that's exactly what we see. And so the lack of self, I've already mentioned, and I think that's more rooted back in the destructive cult. That was the first one I wanted to highlight. And the sort of brainwashing, the degenerate elements of, the degeneration of what God created, right? It's totally creating an automaton. It's an NPC, right? The NPC is, unfortunately, the person who's been the recipient of the destructive cult, but then they can fit in all these different categories. And in the terrorist cult, because they already have no real sense of self, it's very easy for them to self-sacrifice for the larger cause. And that's exactly what we're seeing, guys. And so another element of terrorist cults is they adopt totalitarian elements. What are we seeing right now with the firing of anybody who's associated with anybody who speaks out against BLM? They're fired. They're publicly humiliated. They're not allowed to make a living. We've seen that with the officer in the George Floyd incident. We saw that with the gentleman who flew a banner over the NASCAR race in Alabama. We've seen. I mean, a soccer player. His wife voiced opposition to BLM, and he was fired from playing soccer. How does playing soccer have anything to do with support for BLM? Unless it also has a terroristic cult element where if you're not part of it, you will be destroyed, because there is no sense of self. There is no person. You're a nobody. You're just literally a flesh bag that can be destroyed. So the adopting of totalitarian elements, we see that in our society. It's so prevalent. That's why it's so frustrating, and that's why I made this video, is because I saw as a cult. I was talking about it as a cult. Other people are talking about how BLM is a cult, but nobody was giving it real teeth. And that's what the point of this video was. If you come across, you have friends and you want, the point of today's live stream was for me to just throw it all in here in terms of how does an academic, how do we understand a cult? Guys, they fit every single element. Not even every single element. They fit every element of every type of cult. Sorry, I get a little wound up today. So anyways, that was the last one, the terrorist cult. So we see the destructive cult. We see what's called a doomsday, but really it's a utopian, a millenarian cult. We see the political cult elements. We see the sex cult element. We see the racist cult element, and we've seen the terrorist cult element, all of which apply to BLM and what we're seeing in society. And now the last few that I want to highlight are elements of cults or characteristics of cults. And so the first one that I want to highlight is charismatic leaders. This is, most people are very familiar with this, that most cults have a sort of charismatic leader. And again, I said I was going to come back to this in regards to Osho. If you haven't seen Wild Wild Country on Netflix, again, I don't support Netflix. One of the more, if not one of the most degenerate institutions or entertainment platforms out there right now is Netflix. And I almost think, this is a side note, so I'm diverging here, but I think that's why they call their comedy, it says Netflix is a joke. I almost see that as a sort of linguistic phenomenon to manipulate, because that's what I would, like us who are in opposition to the values that they promote, we'd say that Netflix is a joke. But really, then they make that the name of their sort of comedy section. I think that's a real thought out, deliberate sort of linguistic game that's being played there. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Charismatic leaders are usually a central element of a cult. And so we saw this in Waco with David Koresh, who's, then gunned down and killed by the government. We saw this in Jonestown with Jim Jones, who was a preacher, a minister in the Bay Area, gathered a following, and then they go down to South America and end up drinking the Kool-Aid, right? And I saw before this stream even started, somebody said, don't drink the Kool-Aid or the Marxist Kool-Aid. Absolutely, right? Because that was a reference to Jonestown and Jim Jones. So who is, and I also said, oh, never mind. So then, who is the charismatic leader of this cult? It's celebrities. It's celebrities. And it's because they're already slaves. So celebrities are the charismatic. It's not a leader. It's not a leader. It's leaders. And that's why I think this is even more powerful, because it's not just one central figurehead. It's the stars, right? And again, I talked about in my video or my live stream on hypocrisy, how you create false facades of light and then darkness can hide behind those. So we have all these man-made stars, these Hollywood-made stars, these celebrities. And these celebrities are now the sort of charismatic leader. They always have, or not always, but certainly within the last 50 years, they are basically stooges or subverters, workers for the element in which we're talking about, really evil. But it's celebrities in general are now the charismatic leaders. So that way the cult is represented. Maybe you don't like you don't like a lot of these women actors. You're not really into comedy, but you like The Rock, right? The Rock, he works out, he represents masculinity. You like him. Oh, and so now he's voicing support for this whole stuff. He's voicing support for BLM. So then again, for you on the one-to-one level, that is the charismatic leader, because that is the celebrity, that is the star in which you orient yourself around. And that's exactly how it's being played out. So you see basically every single celebrity come out in support for this stuff, because if they don't have a career, they don't have a job. And so that was my thought on the charismatic leader dimension. It's not one individual, it's all celebrities. That way, any particular celebrity that you personally like the most, they're going to support this stuff, and that's going to get you more likely to join, more likely to acquiesce to the demands, to the culture, to all this stuff going on. And so, guys, please like this stream if you haven't. I know we got about 70 people in here. There's about 48 likes. So if you haven't, maybe you don't like what I'm saying, so that's all right. But if you do, please like this stream. So now we have the charismatic leaders identified. It's all celebrities. Now, what about the sacred text, right? Most cults have something sacred about them. What is the sacred text of BLM? And I think it's quite obviously Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility. Now, I'm not saying that they worship this book. I'm not saying that this is being held on a pedestal like Christians hold the Bible, or it's infallible or something like that. But the reason why I identified Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility as their sacred text is because it encapsulates and embodies all the ideology that's really behind this movement. The postmodernism, the postcolonialism, the feminism, the cultural Marxism, the anti-patriarchy. All this stuff is embodied in this book by this scholar. And again, this stuff isn't even that intellectual. By this scholar, Robin DiAngelo. And so you get this whole sort of postmodern sociological understanding of white fragility, right? How fragile the white people are. Guys, this why I identify as their sacred text. We've already seen, I don't know if you're familiar, but this is now being promoted as like a mandatory reading for teachers, for public school teachers. For public school teachers, the people who are going to educate your children are being forced to read and accept and promote White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. Guys, this is ridiculous, but this is part of the cult, right? Because since it is a cult, how they get people to buy into it is through indoctrination. So, of course, you go through the university system. If you don't have a sense of self, if you didn't grow up with strong parents, if you didn't grow up with strong values, if you didn't grow up with a father, you're very likely to become susceptible to all this stuff when you go through university. That's where you get the postmodernism, the postcolonialism with Edward Said. That's who I don't know if you guys are familiar, but that's the academic. It's really tied to sort of postcolonial thought. He was I believe an Egyptian scholar. The feminism, the cultural Marxism, right? The cultural Marxism, as you guys know, I'm speaking to the choir here, or preaching to the choir, but the Frankfurt School, right? The usage of Freud, who again was a degenerate, and then inserting sort of Marxist ideology into economics, into philosophy, into social theory. All this is what's called cultural Marxism. And so cultural Marxism is the sort of cultural movement of the BLM. This is the sort of foundational ideology that they're working from. This is all late 19th century, 20th century stuff here. Century stuff here. So that's why I think white fragility, and we're seeing it being promoted all the time by these people, is their sacred text, because it embodies what this stuff is all about. And then it's written by a woman. And I've already talked about the sort of feminism that all this stuff is in support of, right? And so if you guys disagree, let me know. But I absolutely think that would be the case. Now, for the third characteristic that I wanted to highlight is the performative ritual. Do they have a performative ritual, this cult, this BLM cult? Yes, it's called kneeling in the Black Power Fist. That is a performative ritual of submission to the cult. That is your initiation, right? Just how it's very easy to, it's not very easy to become Orthodox Christians, but say maybe a Protestant church or even Islam. Islam's very easy to become a Muslim. You just have to make the proclamation, and now you're a Muslim. That same idea I believe, is present within the BLM kneeling and power fist movement. This is the initiative performative ritual that they have. And so you see it if you watch soccer, if you watch, most sports, you're going to see these athletes get down on a knee and throw up the black power fist, or even get on a knee and then be quiet for a moment of silence or something. This is a performative ritual, guys. This is a unifying ritual of a cult. This is exactly what, every cult has a sort of performative ritual. It's the kneeling and the black power fist. And so the last characteristic, and really the last part of this video or this stream, is martyrdom. Is who are the saints? Who are the people who represent the cult? And of course, it's George Floyd. George Floyd is their martyr. This is their first martyr. I mean, to the way that they present it's their first martyr. So you've already seen, depictions of him with angel wings and halos and a sort of almost an iconography, a sort of icon of George Floyd. And yet, what does he embody? He embodies all the things that are already present within these cults. He was an amateur porn star. So the sexual cult element, the sexual degeneracy that's promoted institutionally, he embodies that. What about the drug addiction? Going to be tied to the sort of destructive cult elements, get you tied to any sort of addiction. He represents that. What about the sort of terrorist elements of the terrorist cult and the way that he put a gun up to a pregnant woman's belly while allowing his gang members to ransack her house for drugs and money? You see, he embodies the cult. His life embodies all these different cultic activities and dimensions, these subcategories that I've been highlighting for this last hour or hour and a half almost at this point. He embodies all these things, guys. No wonder he's their martyr. And so I know it's very hard for a lot of these people to start to think about it, that it's so sad, or they try to venerate him as some like really great individual. His kids didn't even know who he was. So again, that ties to what I was talking about in regards to the feminization, the moving back to doing away with paternity, right? He wasn't even there for his children. His son didn't even know what he looked like. And yet he's venerated as the perfect father. Guys, once you see this, you can't not see it. And that's why I wanted to create this stream, because you see how the martyrdom of George Floyd is the embodiment of somebody who has become victim to all these various cults. And I'm sure he had very, again, maybe, I don't know his heart. I don't know what he believed, but he could have been susceptible to the racist element of the cult. I don't know. But certainly the destructive cult elements right there. I have no idea what his politics are. We can only guess. Given his demographics, most likely it leaned at least 92% likely in a particular direction. We see the sex cult elements. We see the terrorist cult elements. It's all there. And so that is the hero. That is the beginning point. That's what ignited all this stuff at a societal level. And that's why they're worshiping him, because he embodies all the things, exactly the fentanyl, the porn, the drug addiction, the crime. I mean, nothing would have happened if he wasn't trying to use fake money. So counterfeit money is the reason why the police had to show up in the first place. And of course, he was high out of his mind on fentanyl. And then he had a heart problem, and hypertension. And it could be because he didn't take good care of himself, right? Which is, again, I would say part of this whole cult in and of itself. So that's all I got for you guys. I had no idea how long I was going to rant and rave. I guess I rant and raved for an hour and 28 minutes. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm going to go through some of these super chats now. But thank you guys for joining me. The first super chat is again by Hunter. He threw in 999 pounds. Thank you very much, brother. He just threw an Orthodox cross. Thank you. I greatly appreciate it. And Nathaniel Hill, my good buddy, threw in 1204. Thank you very much, brother. And he threw in Anaktese tes Konstantinopolis. Now, I'm not exactly sure what I just read. Anaktese Ana K Tese Tes Konstantinus Polos. I don't know. I'm butchering it. But thank you very much, Mr. Hill. Really, really, really appreciate all your support. He's a very good ortho bro. And he is one of my friends. Owen Yoigan. Thank you very much, brother. Always appreciate your help. He always helped me. He's a good guy. And he said the longest word in German is 63 letters long and means law for the delegation of monitoring beef labeling. Try pronouncing it. Oh my gosh. All right. This is going to be terrible. Rind Fleisch et Ket ihr Unsk über Wachschungs Sau. I give up. That's just annoying people at this point. Thank you though, brother, for the 10 pounds. I greatly appreciate it. Womp Womp threw in, I'm not sure what currency that is, but he threw in $5 of it. I greatly appreciate it. He says, Happy Vidovon. Saint Tsar Lazar is a great model for our Orthodox patriarchy, leadership, and nationalism. Thank you very much, brother. I appreciate the $5. I'm not too familiar with Saint Tsar Lazar or what Happy Vidovon is, but it could just be because I'm new to the faith and this means something I should know about. So, thank you very much. And Justin Stam threw in $10. Thank you very much, brother. And I appreciate the combo from earlier. Justin's a great guy. He said, excellent commentary, especially on unifying against the enemy. Yeah. I think, again, us as Orthodox people, we cannot compromise our values. We cannot compromise our theology. The fact that we've become Orthodox is most likely because we absolutely believe it to be true. Now, if that's the case, as I said, I have more in common with a trad Catholic who is upholding all the traditional values in regards to sexual morality, the culture, this or that, than an Orthodox person who's going and protesting with BLM. And so this is a time in this chaos where we're trying to organize and create order. Now, I've already done a stream about that, but in regards to that, we need to form alliances. No, this is not ecumenicism. No, that we are not saying that everything's equal. We're not even engaging with non-Trinitarian theology, but Orthodoxy and Catholics have a very long history, and I think it's a good idea that we build alliances. That, we don't have to take their tradition. We don't have to be Catholic, but I think finding people who are doing good stuff is a good thing. Like I mentioned, the Gordon guy, I forget his last name, and I apologize, but the guy who he had a fallen out with Dr. Taylor Marshall, and he got fired from his job at a Catholic high school because he voiced opposition to BLM. Again, puritanical conformity, right? Part of the terrorist cult. Well, it's an element of the terrorist cult. He lost his job. I respect him. I respect him for standing up for what he believed in. I don't watch Dr. Taylor Marshall. I am not Catholic. I don't support Catholicism, but I see what he's doing on Twitter. I see him calling out Catholic bishops. I see him calling out Catholic priests. I respect that. That man, at least he stands up for what he believes in. I respect that. That's a man that probably will fight. If he's going to fight, I'm fighting. I'm looking for other people that are going to fight. Guys, we are looking for soldiers. We're looking for people who will fight. So with what Justin Stam mentioned, that especially on the unifying against the enemy, we have to find allies. And if they're worshiping the Trinity, if they're worshiping God, well then they're our brothers and sisters, right? We may disagree here and there, but this is not a time to get in a tizzy about specifics about theology that most people aren't even familiar with, right? So that's just what I have to say there, and I think we need to support any traditional Christian who's standing up in opposition to this crap. So that's just my personal opinion. Isaiah V sent $4.99. Thank you very, very much, brother. I appreciate it. Isaiah V mentions, great stuff as always. Should be getting my Rebel mug on Monday. Oh, thank you, brother. The Rebel mug. I got mine. I wish I should have brought it upstairs, but I really like it. The Rebel mug really turns out really well. The Got Church mug, I need to make a correction to. There's an aesthetic that was deliberately put on there. It's a faded aesthetic. I got my Got Church mug. It doesn't look that good printed. It looks like there's a mishap on the printing. And the L, the lambda, the Greek L in logos needs to be capitalized. That was on me. I should have done that. I did not. So the guy who created it just as I asked, and I need to correct that. So the Got Church mug will be fixed, but the Rebel Orthodox coffee mug is perfect. I have it. It looks great. Hopefully you're going to enjoy it. And thank you very much for both the super chat and purchasing the mug. I really, really do appreciate that, Isaiah. And then Pano, my buddy, my fellow Hoosier, he said, bro, I love your content. We need to be rooted. Amen. Amen. And that rootedness is going to be essential. And that's why I'm saying that if we come across other traditional Christians who are actually going to stand up and fight, guys, they're our allies. They're our brothers and sisters. I don't care if they're Lutheran, if they're Catholic. I don't care. If they're in opposition to what's going on, if they believe in the Trinity, if they pray to Jesus Christ at night and they're trying to repent and they're trying to live their life in a better way, that's my brother. That's my sister. I really do not care. And so that's just where I am. Doesn't mean that I don't think orthodoxy is the true faith. Doesn't mean that I don't think that Orthodox theology is the most beautiful thing that I've come across. But that's how I feel. That's how I feel. And I feel like we're not going to win if we don't do that. If we don't take that perception. If we think that us Orthodox guys or us Ortho bros are going to be able to withstand the onslaught that we're going to be up against. Again, this is a real Goliath. This is an institutional Goliath. We're delusional. We're absolutely delusional. Like, we have to have allies. And it doesn't matter what part of Christianity they're from. Now, yeah, and that's just Tim Gordon. Yes, Tim Gordon. Thank you, John Anon. Thank you. And yeah, so Tim Gordon, again, I'm not Catholic. I don't watch Dr. Taylor Marshall that much. I don't watch Tim Gordon stuff, but they stand up for what they believe in. That's my brother. That's my sister. Like, that's what we all are going to come to that moment, guys. Every single one of us we're going to be pushed to a moment where we either stand up for what we believe in or we don't. And that's going to be the defining characteristic. And I don't care if you're Orthodox or not. If you don't stand up for Christianity and what's true, and you go to an Orthodox church, I don't care. I don't care. I have less to do with you than I do with my Lutheran brother or my Catholic brother or my Anglican brother. I mean, it's going to be pretty difficult, though, to find a based person within Anglicanism or Episcopalianism. That's just my general opinion there. But even if we come across some Protestants that are standing in opposition, guys, that's our brothers and sisters. We have to form alliances with them. And so thank you, Pano. Really appreciate it, brother, for the $2. Thank you very much. And then Womp Womp threw in another one. Thank you, brother, for another $5. I really appreciate it. He says, Vitovan is Saint Vitus Day, but very important Serbian holiday. Oh, I did not know. Thank you for sharing that. On this day in 1389, Saint Tsar Lazar died in battle against the Turks to defend Kosovo. Thank you for sharing that. I had no idea. So I'm going to read that again for everybody, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who didn't know that Vitovan is Saint Vitus Day or Vitus Day. I'm not even sure on the proper. I think it's. Anyways. It's a very important Serbian holiday. On this day in 1389, Saint Tsar Lazar died in battle against the Turks to defend Kosovo. Saint Tsar Lazar, I don't even know who he is. I am going to look him up after this stream because those are who I'm looking. Those are my role models right now. It's certainly not The Rock, or I saw somebody say Kevin Hart. It's no celebrity. It's the warrior saints. It's the warrior saints of Christianity. That's who I'm looking up to. That's who I want to emulate. That's who I want to support. That's who I want to be. Although, I don't necessarily want to die in martyrdom or anything like that. But, and so thank you, brother, again for another $5 and telling me what Vidovon is, St. Vitus Day, but very important Serbian holiday. On this day, 1389, Saint Tsar Lazar died in battle against the Turks to defend Kosovo. And then Asna, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I'm not totally positive. He threw in 10 pounds. Thank you very much, brother. And he says, interesting insight in cults in the current political climate. What do you have in line for future videos? Right now, I actually have no plan on, I'm going to be making more videos. I just have no idea what exactly I'm going to be making a video on next. Some of the times I come up, I'll write down video topics for about 2 or 3 videos in advance. I have no idea. I felt convicted to make today's stream about 2 days ago because I saw people calling out BLM as a cult, and then I saw them being challenged, and I saw their inability to actually say why it's a cult. And I thought, oh gosh, it's so obvious. So I was like, you know what? Because I study new religious movements, because I'm familiar with what cults are, or at least how you study a cult or define a cult, I'm just going to run through the whole thing. And even to my surprise, when I really tried to get systematic about it, I was like, oh my gosh, they literally every single dimension of every kind of cult, it seems like it's present. And I think that's why it's so effective in today's society. But in regards to future videos, I don't know. You guys have some ideas, email me. Let me know. Yeah, St. Alexander Nevsky, I threw him in my video on Warrior Saints. I actually have no idea on what my next video is. A lot of the time, it's just me coming, coming up with what I feel is important to talk about, and I'll just spill it. And so that's been the case for the last 4 streams, is that I just get convicted because I pray for, I honestly do. Total transparency. I actually pray to give me insight on what to talk about, because there's so many different topics I could talk about. I mean, there's so many books that I just like to go over, like sections, like chapters, and do all that stuff. But sometimes I'll just pray and ask for insight, and usually, no joke, that I will get some, light bulb that goes off. Say, oh, I need to talk about that. So I will. And so, yeah. So thank you, Asna. I really do appreciate it. I'm really glad that you thought the video was insightful. That was the point. The point was, again, give teeth to the idea that what we're up against is a super cult. I mean, it's a cult of cults. And, yeah, so if you guys disagreed with maybe some of what I had, feel free to put it in the comment section or anything. I'd be interested. And Nick threw in $4.99. Hey, brother, how you doing, man? Hope everything's good in your neck of the woods. He said, big agree on creating allies. Theological disputes are, for me, a time when they aren't trying to destroy icons of our Lord. Exactly, Nick. Like, I don't know if you guys just saw, but there was a priest in Washington, D.C., a Catholic priest, who was walking down the street praying the rosary. They beat him up. The whole side of his face his chin was swollen. This guy had to have been like 80 years old. They beat him up for walking down the street praying the rosary. Guys, that's my brother in Christ. I really do not give a damn what denomination or church that he goes to. That guy walked down the sidewalk praying the rosary and got beat up by BLM protesters. That's because they're demons. They're demons, but because it's a cult. It's a demonic cult, guys. It's a satanic cult. And so I couldn't agree more with you, Nick. Thank you for throwing in the $4.99. Theological disputes are for a time when a more settled time. Right now, we are in war. We are in cultural war, and it's more than culture because people are going to be killed, guys. And I don't mean to be blasphemous. I know that the algorithm's probably going to pick this up and throw it off the video, but guys, this is serious stuff. This isn't a joke. This isn't a time to start worrying about politics or thinking that we're going to vote our way out of this. It's not at all. It's not at all. Like, we are in a serious fight, and I may disagree with Protestantism and their solas. I may disagree with Thomism and Catholicism and the papacy and all that stuff. But if you're willing to fight and die for Christ, who else would you want by your side? And so I think we as Orthodox, who are a little bit over adamant sometimes about our theology and the way, and sometimes a little aggressive. And again, I was there too, but I was that way maybe, a few months ago when things were a little bit more set before the lockdown, before all that, I was maybe a little bit more likely to engage with somebody over some theological dispute. But at this point, if you worship the Trinity, and especially if you're Catholic and you're a trad cath, like I don't, again, if there are some post-Vatican II promote degeneracy, like that's something totally else. But if they're promoting traditional values and they're willing to defend and die for it, guys, that's our ally. That's our brother and sister. So I agree, Nick. Again, thanks for the $4.99. Thank you, everybody who threw in some super chats. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Thank you, everyone who is here. I hope that this video has been edifying and enlightening. I hope that if you do find it edifying and enlightening, that maybe you can share it with somebody who you know. I have no idea what's going to happen to this video if YouTube will keep it up, because I try to go whole hog in regarding to the topic. So have no idea what's going to happen, but maybe somebody, at least, maybe you should download the video in case it gets taken down. I don't know. Who cares, right? Maybe. I don't know. Oh my gosh. Owen threw in 20 pounds. We got another super chat. Holy crap. He said in 1684, Pope Innocent the 11th formed the Holy League, an alliance of Catholic nations and Orthodox Russia to push against the Muslim Ottomans in Europe. An Orthodox Catholic alliance is needed in times of trouble. Absolutely, dude. Amen, Owen. Eugen. We absolutely need a Catholic Orthodox alliance. That I don't see how we can survive without it. I really don't, because the divide and conquer theory, if we're divided with brothers who have very specific theological differences to us, even though we may think those are very important, and certainly they are, leavened, unleavened bread, all this stuff. I get it. Filioque, I get it. But we have to form an alliance with people who are willing to die and fight for what's true, for Christ, for the Logos, for Christianity, for God. And so really appreciate that super chat, Owen. Through 20 pounds. Dang, man. So I'll read it again. In 1684, Pope Innocent XI formed the Holy League, an alliance of Catholic nations and Orthodox Russia, to push back against the Muslim Ottomans in Europe. An Orthodox Catholic alliance, is needed in times of trouble. Couldn't agree more. Thank you very much, brother. I truly, truly appreciate that. Going hard in the paint. We should just launch a second crusade at this point. They can't stop all 1.5 billion Catholics and 200 million Orthodox. Agreed, but unfortunately, Husaria, the majority of, I feel, maybe I'm wrong, but I'd say a large portion of both those Orthodox and Catholics aren't willing to die and defend the holy tradition. I'd say, maybe it's certainly over 50%, maybe it's 60%, but there's a large portion who are already adopted to modernism. Guys, there's a large portion of Orthodox and Catholics who are part of these cults, right? They were susceptible to these various cults, right? You just have to buy into one of these elements, and you're part of the BLM movement. You're on your knee with your fist up, you know, and you're probably wearing a mask, and you're probably wearing your mask in your car because you're an idiot. Husaria, I agree with you though. If all those people who are willing to die and fight for truth came together, like within Orthodoxy and Catholicism, I think we can really make a stand and sort of resist this stuff. And in fact, that would be beautiful for a unification of the churches, right? For the future. Theoretically, imagine that there was a Catholic Orthodox alliance that occurred, whether that through social media influencers, even vocal clergy, right? Vocal Catholic priests that are in opposite, the good ones, the good Orthodox priests, the good ones, that there became an alliance. Imagine this. And we began to fight against this demonic movement. Now, if we were to defeat it, I think that would put us on really solid ground in regards to trying to work out some of the differences in the church. Maybe we can't, all of them. Maybe there's going to be still some differences, you know, but maybe, just maybe we could begin to work something out. Maybe, just maybe, you know, the Bishop of Rome can be re-brought into an Orthodox structure. Maybe, right? I mean, it's possible, and it's something to hope for. So I think it's something to keep our fingers crossed. That's why, again, we got to find alliances. We got to find people who are willing to fight. Oh, geez, Nick threw in $4.99 again. Dude, you should try to have an interview with based Father. How do you pronounce that? Spiridion? Spiridon? Father Spiridon. I absolutely will. I'll reach out to him. To be quite honest, I've only seen like one or two of his videos. I really did like him, but I will reach out to him. He is a great representative of Orthodoxy, and he's a voice of reason. He's a voice of clarity, you know, and so, Nick, I will do that. I'll do that based on your recommendation. Owen also recommended me doing that. So now that there's two people, I will do that. So I will reach out to him, and, you know, and I don't know if you guys are familiar, but Father Hans Jacobsy, he is a Orthodox Antiochian priest. I don't know if you guys are friends with him on Facebook, but he is another great voice that is really in opposition to what's going on and speaking out against the degeneracy, calling it what it is, calling it the Bolshevik Revolution, again, what Rocor even identified as well. So Spreeiden, Father Spreeiden. Okay, thank you, Prism. Oh no, he that was a question. No, I think it's be Spiridon, Father Spiridon. I'm not positive. Ask about Father Spiridon's latest book on the kingdom of Satan. Okay. He wrote his sequel. Maybe I should get his book then before I have him on and read it, because I don't want to be ignorant. I hate appearing ignorant to something that okay, yeah. Okay, sent the correct pronunciation. Spiridon, it's Spiridon. Yeah. Okay. I think he's in a forest somewhere. He probably is, but that's probably where we all should be at this point. Ask Father, he wrote his sequel to Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future. Oh, awesome. Dude, I need to buy that then and read it and have him on to talk about it, because there can't be anything more important to talk about at this point. Do a video on silence. I'd watch that for sure. Oh, it's a film, Silence? I'm not familiar, but I can check it out. Spirited. Yep. Sounds like a spirit. John and Don. Oh, dang. Owen threw in another £2. My gosh, brother. Thank you so much. Do we need a Parler Gab alliance? Yeah. So, actually, this was something that Owen and I were going back and forth with on Telegram. And maybe you guys agree, maybe you don't, but I'll just lay it out. My personal opinion is that the only safe refuge for us in the future is going to be gab.com. Now, I say that because the owner is a Christian and he's J-pilled, and that they're building so many different things. The fact that big tech did everything they could to destroy them, Visa's dropped them, most payment processors have dropped them, that clearly the establishment does not want gab.com to exist. Now, take that and look at Parler. Parler is where I just joined. A lot of you guys probably just joined. And so Parler is this new social media alternative. It's kind of like Twitter, except you have more characters. For me, it sometimes is a little bit clumsy in regards to its working the app. But I saw that to DM somebody, you have to show your government ID on Parler. They'll okay your government ID, and once they do that, then you can send DMs. To me, that's to track people. That's absolutely to track people. I think that's why Fox News has been promoting Parler. I think that's why big tech, even though I've heard there's been voices of opposition, that's why Parler is allowed to still have an app. Gab's app got destroyed in like the first month. I mean, I don't even think it was up that long. I think it was literally like a week or 2 weeks. Gab's app was already taken down. And I saw that on Parler, at least what claimed to be multiple people who were purchasing ads that were anti-vax, that they weren't allowed to pay and promote their ads. Now I saw, because I sent this to Owen, and then he sent me back a screenshot where the owner of Parler got back to him and said this is a glitch, that this is because their system is still new or something like that, and that, sometime in the future we would be happy to have your ads. Now I'm very skeptical. Again, the fact that Parler is even allowed to exist, especially in the time of chaos right now. Think about all the effort that the powers that be are doing to subvert, to destroy things, and yet they're going to allow Parler to exist. It makes me raise my eyebrows. Now, I know some people are very hopeful of Parler. I am not. I think that honestly, my gut intuition is that Parler has a lot of major investors that are really part of the opposition. And that the whole point of it is to allow the right, the conservatives, to go on there, and essentially it's easier to follow. It's easier to track them. It's easier to see what they're talking about. It's easier to control and manipulate, I think. And that's why I personally feel that I personally feel that Gab is going to be our only refuge, because even though they've allowed people that I know some find repulsive, they don't take them down. And we see that they're willing to fight. It's not that they just have a Twitter-like platform. They now have encrypted chat rooms that you can create, so you can chat with people, and it's encrypted. They also have like a new Zoom version. They also have Gab Trends, which is it's great. And then you saw Dan Bongino create his version, which then gets, again, promoted by the system. Even though I see Bongino speaking some truth right now. I follow Bongino. I followed him with the whole Russiagate. That's how I got familiar with him. And so I saw the Drudge Report used to be kind of where people went, but we see with Gab that they have their own trends page. Like, to me, it's better than it's better than Drudge. Why? Because all the articles are voted on by the people that read them. They're voted on by you and me. I go to Gab Trends all the time to see what's going on, and I always find articles that you're not going to find on Twitter or wherever, on Facebook. And so if you don't, I highly recommend going to Gab Trends. It's great. And so I just see Gab doing a lot of different things. I see the system being in opposition to him. And so I'm going to spend a lot of my effort building there. I told Justin today when we talked that, moving forward, I'm making Gab my home base. I'm just like I'm building my website as the sort of central home base of my business, and trying to, with the help of some of the ortho bros, trying to get on my own server, so I can never be taken down. I have full autonomy. I'm fully, I'm safe. I'm safe. That I am going to, in regards to social media, I'm going to build on Gab. That's the only one that I feel safe on. That I know I'm not going to be taken down. That I can speak the truth about whatever I believe in. And so I'm verified there. I have a premium account. And so I'm going to create a group. You're allowed, if you have a premium account, you're able to create a group. I'm going to create maybe an Orthodox group, a traditional Christian group, or whatever, for people to, again, meet, organize, talk about Christianity and being in opposition to the system. And so if you guys are on Gab, find me at DPHARRY, at DPHarry. That's the only place where I think we're going to be safe. And because I'm talking about 2 years, I'm talking about a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I don't think Parler is the answer. I really don't. Just the fact of things that are already coming up, just the fact that big tech allows them to exist. Clearly, none of the main social medias are. I think it's Gab. I think it's Gab. And so I'm going to begin posting. That's going to be my central social media. And then I'll use all the other ones. I still use Twitter. I'll still use Instagram. I'll still use all these things. But everything that I post on there is going to be posted on Gab. Gab is going to be my central basis. I've had an account for basically a year, I think, and I've rarely used it. Every once in a while I'll post there. But given what's happened, that's where I'm going. That's where I'm putting. That's where I'm going to put in all my eggs in that basket, because it's the only one that I feel is safe, because they've built it so it can withstand the scrutiny, right? They built it so you can use cryptocurrency, stuff like that. So the system can't stop you. If guys, if we're trying to build a future, those are the people we partner with, right? I don't give a darn what Torba's theology is. He worships Jesus Christ. He worships the Trinity. He gets what's going on a global political sphere, and he's fighting for what he believes to be true. And a lot of my values are also his values. So if he's fighting, I want to fight with him. So that's why I'm going to spend a lot of my time on Gab. Got another super chat. CM threw in $4.99. Thank you very much, CM. Thank you very much. I was going to say brother. I don't know if you're a guy or a girl. I'll assume you're a guy, just given my general audience. Just discovered you through David the Real Medwhite vid and have been binging vids the past 2 days. At gym now, working on the temple. Keep up the great work, King. Oh, dude, thank you very much, brother. Super based and red pilled at the gym. I went to the gym earlier today. Had a nasty back and leg workout. It's great, man. Totally exhausted myself. So glad you're at the gym working on the temple. Amen to that. And thank you very much for checking out the videos. I really do appreciate it. And I'm glad that at least I could say something or provide some information that's useful for you. That's always the goal. The goal is to always have a video that is jam-packed with information that can help provide a larger, more accurate perspective for people. And sometimes I get things wrong. That's fine. I will admit any error I come across. I'll admit it. I am not perfect. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I am not a genius, but I have a bit of an angle on things, and I want to speak what's true and say what's true. And so I'm very glad, CM, that you have found the content and you enjoy it and you find it useful. And I also really appreciate that you're building your body. You're focusing on your temple. So thank you very much. And right back at you. You're a king. So thank you. If anybody else have anything they want to mention, John Anon says Twitter was the most censorship, but the biggest reach. Gab has the least censorship, but the smallest reach. But most normies won't ever see anything on Gab. It's true, John Anon. But I think it's just a matter of time. And so my goal is to just build there. Maybe I won't have many followers, but if my entire repertoire of information and videos and what I'm trying to build can be shared there, and I know it's not going to be taken down, well, I feel like 1,000 followers on Gab is worth more than 10,000 on Parler or on Twitter or anything, because that stuff can be taken from you like that. But Gab has shown that they won't do that. So I agree with you. It has a much smaller reach. But I feel like I'm trying to find solutions for the long term, and I think Gab is one of those. Husaria says, "Can you guys pray for me? I've been struggling with masturbation, porn addiction, and have been really anxious about trying to get a job and get my life together since I hit 20." Husaria, you're not alone, brother. We will pray for you. I'm sure a lot of the guys here, though, are sympathetic to you. Guys, we live in an overly sexualized world and culture. All of us are struggling with that. Nobody I know is not struggling with masturbation and porn and lust and sexual urges, all that stuff. So almost every guy I've talked to is dealing with that same stuff. So Husaria, don't feel embarrassed. Do try to work on it. We all are. We have to become stronger. We're all weak. We're weak because we grew up in a nasty satanic culture. But yeah, any of the guys out there, please pray for our brother. Please pray for each other, guys. We're all struggling with this. If you restrict yourself to a platform of like-minded people, doesn't it just become an echo chamber? I'm not sure who you're talking about, because I said I was going to use all platforms until I'm banned, but Gab's going to be my home base. Everything that I post on any other social media will be present on Gab, because I know it'll be there in the future. And so, and creating an echo chamber isn't bad. I mean, guys, we have to organize. So trying to have a bunch of people who think differently, look, diversity is not my strength. I'm not looking for diversity. I'm looking for warriors. I'm looking for like-minded individuals that will fight. So I get your point. I understand. But if I want to know what progressives are up to, I can just create I could create a fake Twitter account or something. But I already know what they think. I already know what they believe, and I'm in opposition to that. So I creating an echo chamber of trad Catholics and Orthodox people who are willing to fight for truth, that sounds beautiful to me. That's not something to be derogatory. Owen said, "What has Torba said about the Jews? I didn't know he was critical of them until that DM you sent." Torba is, it's not that he makes it public, but he's made references. I'm sure other guys are aware that he is J-pilled. Especially, I mean, guys, the whole system's attacking Gab. You don't think he's learned it by now? You don't think he's learned that he's being called a Nazi and all this stuff? Come on. I can't give you any specific tweet or something that he shared, but the guy knows what's going on. He's not a Paul Joseph Watson who I like, but just, I mean, the mental gymnastics PJW does to not call out, sometimes it's hard to watch. It's like, geez, are you serious, man? How do you see all this and you don't get it? Anyways, I love you're addicted to this world video. I was sold after seeing that. Oh, Magdalene, thank you very much. I truly appreciate that. And Prism said 100% right. Quality over quantity. 100 Coomers over 1,000 Ortho Bros. Absolutely. That's how I see it. Again, because I'm interested for the future. I want people who will fight. I want brothers that will fight with me. That if we are up against something serious here. Neurocaf said it's time to stop being beaten down by platforms that hate us in vain. Hope that a normie might see it. If recent events have opened our eyes, it's time to split for our own platforms. Exactly. And that's why at least Gab's created by a Christian. It's persecuted by our enemies. And it's somebody that we can trust that's trying to build. Justin Sam said, stay strong. Thank you, brother. And God bless you and your family. What's your baptismal name? Actually, I don't have one because all my names are Christian. So David and Patrick, my patron saint is Saint Patrick. So, yeah, I was told that you get a baptismal name if you don't have a Christian name. I already have a Christian name. And I'm not clergy, so I don't have to adopt a new name. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that was my understanding. Somebody can correct me. Just the fact that you are sincerely trying to address flaws is good. Absolutely. Good to keep several channels open, Gab open. Yeah. Grab may grow and good for like-minded free speech, but normies need to get red-pilled through Twitter with viral memes and links. Oh, John Anon, I totally agree, man. I totally agree. That's why I said I'll still use those, but I'm by making Gab home base, I'm going to be more willing to voice critical opposition on those other platforms because I don't care if I get deplatformed. You know, like I didn't start a Church of the Eternal Logos Twitter handle until January of this year, and in 2019 I got deplatformed, if you will, from Twitter because Mindy Robinson, I don't know if you guys know who she is. She's like this conservative commentator, former porn star or whatever. I posted pictures of with her out without makeup, and like she looked horrible, and she had like a double chin, and I was just calling her out for being a fake Christian. She reported me for harassment, and Twitter deleted my channel. So that was how my actual David Patrick Carey Twitter got taken down. And so I was done with Twitter until I had Church of the Eternal Logos, and then Jay was on there, and he shared a video, and it got some traction. So I'm like, oh well, I guess I better get on Twitter. But I'm gonna be speaking my mind. If Twitter bans me, so be it. I don't care at this point. The only thing I'm trying to protect would be my YouTube channel, and all the other social medias. Why are we censoring ourselves? At least in my mind, I know. We always need brothers and sisters on there to red pill other people, but if I don't. I'm tired of feeling like I have to tiptoe around language and the wording and my rhetoric because it might then cause some social justice warrior to report me, and then my stuff's going to get taken down. It's like, I don't care at this point. So I'm not down with Jewish bashing. Okay. Haven't been able to visit a church because of the virus stuff, but I plan on going to church, shopping to all the Orthodox churches in my area as soon as I can. I just got a text from Subdeacon Mark. He says he says at church tomorrow, he's going to help me with my Greek pronunciation. Yeah, I probably need that. Thank you, Subdeacon Mark. Greatly appreciated. I will see him tomorrow at Divine Liturgy at 10 a.m. Would you think of Oswald Spengler's book, The Decline of the West? Yeah, I mean, Spengler's book's all right. I mean, he's not a Christian. So it's good, but there's also, again, there's things about the West we have to protect. So I am not a big fan of some of the rhetoric I've seen within Orthodoxy that like wants the West to be destroyed. Of course, I agree with the problems of the West, with the degeneracy of the West, with the immorality of the West, but that hasn't always been the case. Even though maybe some of the presuppositions that the trajectory of history has led in this general direction, Shakespeare needs to be preserved. There's a lot of Western European history that needs to be preserved. There's lots of things to be proud of. There's no reason to be a Western European or European American and to be shameful of your heritage. That is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. And if you have any shame, it's because you've probably been brainwashed by the destructive cult. So what books are you currently reading, brother? Okay. Symptoms of the Universe. Tricky question. So one is Logos Rising. I'm trying to finish E. Michael Jones's big book. I need Subdeacon Mark hammers me all the time to get this book read, The Freedom of Morality. So I don't know if you guys have seen it or read it, but it's not a beginner book on Orthodox theology. It's more of a it's a more sophisticated book on theology. But Subdeacon Mark swears by it. I've read a little bit of it, and I find it really good. What I love about it is that he puts ideas and things together, and it helps reshape, reframe one's perspective. So I really look forward to getting through this. Subdeacon Mark feels this is one of the better, one of the best, I should say, Orthodox books out there. So if you guys haven't, check out The Freedom of Morality by Christos Yanaras. Very, very good. So that's one that I'm working on. I also have another book over there I'm working on. What is that? Well, I have more academic stuff. So reading non-Christian things, reading about intellectual history. I have a whole, for example, I'm going through Father Frederick Copleston's book, and so you're asking me on what videos I plan on making. One is on Socratic philosophy, on Socrates. So there's a whole section on here on Socrates I was going to go through, and I was actually going to do a live stream on Socrates. So that's definitely something that you can expect in the future. I got a bunch of books over here, really. I know the triads. Subdeacon Mark and I are going to go through Polygamous and the triads. We're going to make a video on that. So that's something you can keep in mind in the future. Have no idea. I know that Jay and I were going to record the second half of our video on the mystical theology of the Eastern Church, which is not over here. Here it is. So the mystical theology of the Eastern Church. Dyer and I were going to, I think tomorrow. I actually need to refresh. It's been so long since we did the first half that I need to go back over the second half of that book. But we're going to be recording that. I think that's going to be for his channel members only. So the website subscribers, those members will be able to watch that video. So that basically is what I'm reading right now. And then of course, I'm working through this with my group with Subdeacon Mark every Sunday after liturgy at 1:00. We do a Zoom conference, and about 10 of us are working through On the Incarnation by St. Athanasius, the one that is translated by Dr. Father John Baer, which can be, if you saw my video with David the Real Medwhite, he talked about how he's getting into a little bit of Origenist stuff, so who knows? But Saint Athanasius. So those are basically all that I'm working through right now. I want to finish E. Michael Jones's book because I want to have him on the channel. Again, I know one of the contentious things is, again, he talks about Neoplatonism and orthodoxy. I find it difficult to wrap my mind around what exactly he is seeing or talking about. But, he was just banned from Amazon. He is another one of the brothers in Christ that I think is he's clearly willing to fight. E. Michael Jones is clearly willing to fight the system, and he's doing a good job. Now, I don't know much about him personally. I watched some of his videos, and so my goal is to read his book, have that finished, and have him on to talk about his book and talk about logos, and I'll ask him pointed questions. Maybe the sort of abstract ways in which he uses logos. Does he find that to be in opposition to a sort of Christological, a theological understanding? I asked him these things, but in a very respectful way. Like, I'm not, again, the guy's fighting. I may have theological differences with him, but he puts his money where his mouth is. And so somebody Dozo Mode said, have you seen my email? Dozo Mode, I'm not sure who you are, so I don't know who or what your email is. I'm sorry. I get a lot of emails. I can go back through. If you want to mention your name real quick, I can know specifically. Dozo Mode. And Mr. Italiano said, would you ever consider becoming a priest or deacon? No. Nope. That's not what I want to do. I don't have no interest in becoming a priest or a deacon. My interest is to be a sort of academic, an intellectual, public intellectual, and I want to be a voice for the laity. So My goal is not to become clergy. My goal is to just be lay and know what's going on and try to be a voice for laity. And that's really my goal. So I have no interest in becoming clergy. So Jonathan Paggio and Jay Dyer had a feud on Twitter like 2 years ago, but I saw they reconciled. Yeah, they're good. Jonathan Paggio's video on how Santa Claus exists is the most woke video I've ever seen. Well, it's just, I mean, it's good, yeah. But yeah, the idea that symbolism, mythology is living, I think is a great concept just to keep in mind. So, order some E.M. Jones recently. Not sure how long it's going to get here. Yeah, it's going to be a while because he probably has to send it from Fidelity Press. So, which is in South Bend. I'm in Indiana, so I got mine fairly quickly. The idea of doing a video on what the Bible says about the characteristics of leadership sounds good. Yeah, that actually, thank you, Magdalene. That is probably going to be my next video, is calling out Trump, talking about what the Bible says about leadership, how we as Christians are to understand leadership, and then show how inept and Trump has been during all this stuff. That's probably my next video. John Anon says, write a book. Well, I got to write my dissertation first. So that's going to be a book, and that's going to be on talking about psychedelic esotericism. So talking about how psychedelic spirituality, where that worldview comes from, and rooting that back into the Western esoteric traditions and all the way back to indigenous traditions. So that is what I'm working on for my dissertation. That will be my first book. That is the only thing I'll be working on in terms of writing until that's done. Then I'll move into all my other topics I'd like to write books on because I'd be able to. So, Father Trenum. I'd love to have Father Trenum on. Great grad, and I met his son at a Panos says base Nick. I met his son at an OCA church in Berkeley, California. So, tips on becoming an intellectual. There's, I don't know if there's real tips for it. One of them is certainly you have to read. It's more about gaining like a larger perception of reality. Actually, it's not even that, because a lot of intellectuals aren't that. It's really just about words and reading and being able to retain information. So, and that's not what everybody's supposed to do. Not everybody needs to become an intellectual. That's not everybody's gift. That's not everybody's purpose. So maybe that is yours. Maybe it isn't. But really, read is the only thing you have to read. Yeah, like Owen said, you have to read. Yeah, that's basically it. I finished my undergrad a year ago, and I'm not sure where to go now. Well, I recommend praying on it and figuring out, and also thinking about what your passion is, and in regards to passion, what is useful, and how you can contribute to society, how you can contribute to a community. Mine, I believe my gift is conveying ideas. I may be wrong on that, but I believe that's how I can help a community or a group, is just to convey ideas. So anyway, okay, we're going to end it there. It's been going way too long. It's 2.5 hours. Thank you guys very, very much. Thank you for all the love and support. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. And, yeah, I will see you guys next time. It'll probably be, since I'll be recording with Dyer tomorrow, which you guys won't be able to see because it's for his members channel. My next stream will probably be either Monday or Tuesday. So, and then Magdalene reminded me that of what I said. It will probably be on the Bible and characteristics and how one identifies a leader and is a leader. Okay, I gotta go, but Symptoms of Universe said, do you think the situation in the West is going to get way worse before it gets better? If so, how worse? Because it seems like the New World Order. Yeah, it's going to get way worse. Guys, this is going to be a physical battle. Like, this is a civil war. This isn't Yeah, absolutely. It's going to get worse. Like, you need to get good with God. You need to find ways to defend yourself, meaning weaponry, and you need to find like-minded people or be around people that you love. And are you learning ancient Greek, or do you plan to? No, I studied Greek, even though you wouldn't be able to tell based on my pronunciation of Nathaniel Hill's super chat. I did some Greek, some Koine translation during my master's, but my languages for my research is actually Spanish and Mandarin, because I study new religious movements in America. So I don't really need to know an ancient language. I need to know modern languages. And so English, Spanish, Mandarin are the three most spoken languages in this country. And that's what I got certified on. So I've already been certified on the Spanish and the Mandarin, and that's it. So thank you guys. Again, I'll see you guys next time, most likely Monday or Tuesday. We'll be talking about leadership and how we understand that based on the Bible. So I will see you guys next time. As always, God bless.